Welcome to the Great Loop Radio podcast, brought to you by America's Great Loop Cruisers Association. We're dedicated to sharing Great Loop information and inspiration with those actively cruising, planning for, or dreaming about a Great Loop adventure. I'm Kim Russo. I'm the director of AGLCA. Today we are going to visit a very special place on the Great Loop, and that is Mackinac Island, really a gem on the Great Loop because of its beauty and uniqueness. And we'll jump into that conversation in just a minute. But as always, first I want to recognize and thank our Admiral sponsors who support AGLCA at the highest level. They are Curtis Stokes and Associates, Great Loop Yacht Sales, Passage Maker Trawler Fest, Skipper Bob Publications, and Waterway Guide Media. As always, we encourage our listeners to support these businesses that support the Great Loop. And with the sponsors recognized, I'd like to go ahead and introduce Tad and Libbie Sheldon. Tad and Libby, thanks for joining me today.
You're welcome. Pleasure to be here.
Yes. Yeah, it's great to see you both. And you, of course, are loopers in progress, but go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourselves and your boating experiences.
Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, me first. All right. Both of us have quite a bit of boating experience. I come from a power boater family from northern Michigan. I actually call Mackinac City my hometown. My parents moved around a lot in their careers, but we always came back to Mackinac City where we have a family cabin. And the boating experiences include boat camping as a kid in the Lake Cheneau Islands north of Mackinac City and north of Mackinac Island. Then we had a sailboat out in San Francisco Bay for 20 years. And then recently we've had Selkie for the last, since May 2021, doing the loop. Lib?
Yeah, I grew up in a sailing family, not a powerboat family. Spent all my summers on Saginaw Bay, which is a little bit lower down from the tip of the Mitt. And that's where I did a lot of sailing and so forth. And so Tad and I had this Great Lake experience and found ourselves in California. And that's when we got our boat in San Francisco Bay. And then it was just been a pleasure for us to be able to do the Great Loop and then come back to Mackinac City where we still have the family cabin and enjoy that area. And so that's why we're ready to talk about it.
Yeah, and you mentioned Selkie. That's your Great Loop boat. Tell us what kind of boat she is.
So she's a Katie Krogan 39. She's a 2000 model. She's built over in Kaohsiung, Taiwan. Really solid boat. Really quite a special boat, we think, in terms of being on her. She's been very comfortable and has got us out of a few tight spots when we've been caught in weather. So yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, and you're looping in segments. So kind of tell us where you started and how far you've gone so far.
Want to start?
Yeah, well, I boarded the boat in Solomons, Maryland. It was purchased in Baltimore, and Tad took it down to have some work done in Solomons. So we started the loop on May 12th, 2022, and went up the East Coast, the Chesapeake Bay, and out into the Jersey Shore, into the Hudson Bay, Statue of Liberty.
Yes, Hudson River.
Hudson River. Went up to Albany, made a left, and went through the Erie Canal. From there, we took the Trent Severn Waterway in Canada and came out on the eastern shore of Lake Huron. And that's where Georgian Bay is in the North Channel, and really enjoyed that area a lot. And then we were on a little bit of a time schedule, which you really shouldn't be, to get to northern Michigan, to Mackinac City, to meet up with family. And so that was the first segment of our loop. We stayed in Michigan at Mackinac City for over a month, and we toured around that area and then put it up in the heart in Sheboygan, Michigan. So that's when we got off the boat. That was our first segment.
Yeah, our second segment started back in Sheboygan, went back up to Mackinac City, reprovision, and we went back into Canada and spent at least a month in Georgian Bay just exploring around that area, which I think for us was the highlight of the loop, and just a place that you just can't spend too much time in. You definitely want to get out of there before the ice forms, but
for sure.
It's a wonderful place. But then we wound up going down through Lake Michigan on the Wisconsin side to Chicago, where we had the 280 looper boats all waiting to go down the Illinois River. And thanks to the Looper Association, it was very well organized, and we got everybody through safe and sound for the most part. maybe a few prop dings here and there, but other than that, everybody got down the river system just fine, and wound up down in the Gulf, and now where the boat is stored, just east or just west of Punta Gorda, but halfway between Sarasota and Fort Myers at Safe Cove Inc. on the hard, waiting for hurricane season to get over.
Yeah. And we'll have to have you come back another time and talk about looping in segments like that, because we do get a lot of questions about looping in segments. And when you're doing it in segments, it can be so different. So it's really hard to cover that topic when somebody asks, how do you do it? Where do you stop? Because it's really wide open. But obviously, you've had some experience in figuring that out. But today we want to talk about Mackinac Island. Absolutely beautiful place. And I like to try and cover places where the current group of loopers is starting to approach at this time of year. So when I realized it was getting to be a time where it makes a lot of sense to cover Mackinac Island, I thought of you two immediately, because of course we were across from Selkie and Mackinac City for a little while, and that's where I found out that you're a local there. So I find it really hard to convey how special Mackinac Island is, because it's kind of a feeling you get there. But tell us what it is about Mackinac Island. You know, what makes it unique and what makes it so special?
It's a wonderful place, and it's one of the reasons it's one of the top rated places on the loop. It's first off, I just have to make an editorial comment here, and the fact that Mackinac is spelled ends with a C. So a lot of people who are not familiar with the area always say Mackinac Island, which of course will allow you to be immediately called a fudgy, which is the nickname for tourists up there. But it's pronounced, everything up there is pronounced Mackinac, even though most everything is pronounced, ends with a C in the spelling for Mackinac. It's located in the Straits of Mackinac, just east of the Mackinac Bridge, which of course the Straits bridges Lake Michigan and Lake Huron. And it's an amazing place. The most unique thing about it is there are no cars allowed on the island. It's all horse and buggy or bicycle. And that makes for some interesting traffic dynamics on the island. Of course, the drivers of the horses are very careful with all the bicyclers rubbernecking around there and wandering in the paths of everybody. The downtown is pretty well what it looked like even before I was a kid. It's been the island was first used as a resort back in the not too long after the Civil War ended, and the Grand Hotel, which is there, was built in 1850 or 1870, I think. Was built. The Grand Hotel is one of the main features of the island. It's a resort hotel. It's about a quarter mile long. It's the largest summertime resort hotel in the world, and in the fact that it gets closed down in wintertime and completely shut down, and then restarted up in the spring the next year. It's about a 3 mile long and about 1.5 miles wide. So it's not a huge island. It's about a 7 mile bike ride around the island, which is a wonderful bike trail. It's pretty level. So anybody who can ride a bike can do this without a problem. But one of the neat things about it is that, and the reason you want to spend a few days on the island is the interior of the island is just filled with lush deciduous tree forests, and just really pleasant bike riding. If you don't want to bike ride, there's plenty of horse-drawn carriage tours that'll take you up into the center of the island to show things like the arch and the old battlefields that are on there. One of the neat things about Mackinac, the Straits of Mackinac, is that it was first explored by the white man, if you will, in the mid 1650s, and it was Catholic missionaries and fur traders that came in and just started exploring the place. And the route to get there was not down through Ontario and up Erie and then up to Lake Huron. It was across the top of Lake Huron from Georgian Bay, from using the river system back to Montreal. And so there's a lot of French influence up there. There's a lot of British influence up there. There's a couple of forts both on the island and also in Mackinac City that really give you a sense of what the history is. And so it's just a really special place.
Yeah, I think so much history there. Go ahead, Libby.
I was going to say, I think what makes it so special is it's so beautiful. It's so pretty. with the blue water and the lush green. And it's just, I think that the colors and seeing it in person just makes it special.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about one of the unique things is no motorized vehicles. And that sounds fine and quaint as a visitor, but one of the things that was really stunning to me was to consider that as a local. And we talked to locals, and a woman who was toting her 3 kids to the grocery store on bikes. If you just think about daily life, even if you're going somewhere nearby without a car, it's just really a fascinating way to live. And of course, the Grand Hotel is the well-known resort there, and they have a huge luggage cart, as you know, pulled by horses. But we were fascinated by watching some of the attendants from some of the small little boutique hotels riding bikes down the street with like 6 or 7 suitcases balanced on their bike that they were taking to their facility for tourists. So it's just really fascinating, as I said, to think through how you would have to change the way you do the most basic things if you've never had a car. And loopers get to experience that a little bit traveling around without a car. But think about permanent daily life like that, and it's just really fascinating. Do you know, Tad, and if you don't know, it's fine, but about how many people live on the island year round? My recollection is it's only about 500. Most people leave for the winter.
If it's 500, I'd be surprised. It's a very small number. You think about the population in the summertime with the ferry traffic coming over, it probably gets up to 20,000 on the island on the really busy days. But in the wintertime, it's a very unique situation over there, in the fact that they do allow a motorized vehicle on the island, but it's only in the wintertime, and it's called a snowmobile. Then they have to they basically make the run on the ice over from St. Ignace to the backside of the island and come on. There's also an airboat that does a ferry system of critical grocery supplies for the folks that live on the island year round. And they also have a couple of ferries that are worthy of breaking ice, not the 2.5 foot thick ice that sometimes forms in the Straits, but the several inches of ice they'll be able to get back and forth in wintertime. So it's a very interesting lifestyle over there.
Absolutely. You mentioned the ferry, and I remember you telling me about a special tie you have to Mackinac Island because you actually worked on the ferry. So tell us about that.
Yeah, I worked on Straits of Mackinac too, at the time was Straits Transit. It's still an operating, one of the slower ferries, but it's also one of the ones that runs in the really rough weather when the Straits gets pretty rough. Yeah, I did 7 days a week, 10 hours a day at union wages, and it paid for about 2 years worth of college. It was quite an experience to be able to come over. One of my favorite experiences on that was when I was working. They had a night boat at the time, and the night boat went down, and so the Straits of Mackinac 2 had to fill in, and so our 10-hour days went to 14-hour days, and we had essentially what was a 3-hour layover on the island before we made the last run back to Mackinac City. And so the habit would be the deckhands and the captain would just lock up the boat, and we'd walk up to the island house. And we'd basically have tea at the bar and just listen to the musicians that were playing. And it was always cool because usually the musicians recognized us by dedicating a song to the night boat crew. And it was a real special time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the waterway that the ferry runs, if it's running from Mackinac City over to Mackinac Island, is basically right through the Straits of Mackinac, which depending on your sources, you can find lots that will tell you about how treacherous that body of water can be. So, what's it like crossing that daily, but also what can loopers expect when they're coming through the Straits of Mackinac?
I think it depends upon the year, but basically you really have to be cognizant of the weather systems that are coming through. Traditionally the winds blow from the west. But when you get a calm period, the winds will switch around to the east, but they're very light winds, less than 10 knots and very smooth. And I would say probably 80% of the time, the water is pretty smooth up there during the summertime. You start getting into September and October, then you'll start seeing some more storms roll through as the jet stream shifts around. But you basically have to watch the weather, and there are places to run to, but if you're making the commitment to run over to Mackinac City from the island or even around to St. Ignace, you could run into some really bumpy weather. So you just need to be very careful.
Yeah. So, hopefully we are enticing lots of loopers to stop and take some time in Mackinac Island. What are some of the options there? Where can you tie up? And are there anchorages available nearby the island as well?
Yeah, so Mackinac Island has one big yacht harbor. It's run by the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, like a lot of the marinas in Michigan are. And you can make a reservation online to go ahead and to make reservations. Unfortunately, the reservations do fill up pretty quickly in the peak times during the summertime.
Do it early.
Yeah, do it early and try, we say don't be on a schedule, but if you really want to guarantee yourself a spot, make a reservation early and try and make it. The one little secret that I'll say is that they always hold a few slips open on the reservation system, and that's for those stormy days where people can't get in or out. They will allow. So it's always a good idea to give a call to the marina the day you're coming in, if you don't have a spot, to see if they don't. Otherwise, it's St. Ignace or Mackinac City. There is one other basically it's a long finger dock that is available for boaters, but that is often used by some of the bigger yachts that come in, and not necessarily easy. And there's no amenities associated with it. The Straits, the Mackinac Island Harbor, run by the DNR, just finished their rebuilding their boaters services house with the showers, the laundry, and it's a very nice facility. And it just really adds to the enjoyment of the island, I think.
Yeah. And any viable anchorages that are close enough to dinghy in?
There are some mooring balls in to the east of the marina inside the harbor, and some people will go in and anchor, and there's a dinghy dock there. There's just not a lot of room, and I would be cautious during the heavier blows because the whole island the area around the island is essentially limestone and clay on the bottom. And it's a little difficult to set an anchor in a few spots. You can, in a pinch, go over to Round Island on the backside if the winds are coming out of the west, but you won't be able to come across on dinghies because gets really rough in the cut between Round Island and Mackinac Island too.
Yeah. Well, and if you cannot get a reservation on Mackinac Island, which we recommend, and what I'm told from other boaters who have done that is there's nothing like being there in the early morning or in the evening after the tour boats and the ferry boats have left for the day. We did not have a reservation. We were concerned about some weather issues and our commitments and schedules. So we actually tied up in Mackinac City, which is one option. But so tell us, we didn't find it a very big detriment to be over in Mackinac City because you take the ferry across. But what are some of those options? St. Ignace, Mackinac City, what's that like if you have to tie up there and head over to the island?
I think I'll second what you said. The nights on the off hours on the island are what really makes it special. But if you can't get into the island, like you say, Mackinac City or St. Ignace are the two local places where the ferries run from. St. Ignace is in the Upper Peninsula. It has a city municipal marina with floating docks. It's a pretty nice marina, and it's not as touristy a town as Mackinac City is. But it has all the amenities you want, and it also has quite a few. If you can get access to a car, there's some really cool places to see in the Upper Peninsula there. Mackinac City has two marinas. One is the municipal marina just to the north, and then just to the south. The marinas are right next to each other. Just to the south is a Straits state dock where you and Libby and I stayed, the Perch and Selkie. The Muni Marina is a little older marina. The docks are fixed docks. So when you have water, we don't have tides in the Great Lakes, of course, but you do get varying water levels. So sometimes it can be a bit of a step off the boat in there. But the other dock, the Straits State dock, has the floating docks, and it's a very well done marina, and just very, very safe places to be. And then, of course, the ferry docks for both St. Ignace and Mackinac City are within walking distance, and definitely worthwhile going over.
All right. Let's take a quick break and play a message from a sponsor. When we come back, I want to talk about once you're actually on the island, what are some of the things to see and do. So we'll take that break. We'll be back in a moment. Cross Country Boat Transport has been a family-owned company since 1991. We have 3 drivers with boatloads of experience transporting over-dimension power and sailboats around the lower 48 states. If your perfect looping boat is on the wrong coast, give us a call or send us an email. We'll be happy to discuss transport and answer any questions you may have. Check out our website at crosscountryboat.com, where you can request a quote, view our gallery, and read testimonials from past customers. We're also the go-to for mass transport down to Mobile for our sailing loopers. Did you know that 50 years ago, the first ever chart kit was born? Chart kits are one of more than 100 chart products from MapTech to help loopers. MapTech's Embassy Cruising Guides and Anchorage books are also a must for loopers. Go to their website, maptech.com, to get started. That's maptech.com. Want more? How about moremaptech.com? It's an interactive website with even more information for loopers. That's moremaptech.com. While you're there, check out MapTech's drone videos. These let you virtually navigate a destination before you get there. Just another aid for loopers, and thanks to MapTech, an AGLCA sponsor. We're back on the Great Loop Radio podcast. My guests today are Tad and Libby. They are sharing some details about Mackinac Island, which is one of the magical gems of the Great Loop that we encourage everybody to take the time to stop there. Since you've been there many times, Tad, you're a local, Libby, you've been there many times. What are both of your favorites? You know, what are the must-sees that people just simply have to do once they get to Mackinac Island?
I have to say, for me, I have to ride around the island on a bicycle. I love the perimeter road. The surface is so nice, it's smooth, and just sometimes stopping and having a picnic along the way and just sitting around the shore. But doing that bike ride is a must for me. And then I'm just going to come back to being on the island on off hours and waking up in the morning and hearing that clip clop of the horses starting to move and bring luggage and that sort of thing. It's a very unique experience.
There's I mentioned the Grand Hotel in terms of places to visit. The Grand Hotel these days charges $10 for visitors to come into their lobby and actually be inside the hotel. But I think it's $10 easily well spent. They actually have a really nice pool there as well that the guests can use as of there. This town itself has several good restaurants and some other boutique hotels, like you mentioned, and some Airbnbs. The thing that's probably most known for, and I mentioned it, I think, in the beginning, was the fact that we call tourist fudgies up there. There's a lot of candy and fudge shops up there, and we don't necessarily partake of those because my blood sugar doesn't like that sort of thing. But they have some very good fudge shops and some not so good fudge shops. I would recommend Murdick's, not spelled Murdick, as the top fudge shop in Mackinac Island. There are, like I said, the restaurants there. I can't think of the ones off the top of my head that we've been to, but there's one that's been in operation since the 1800s, and it's still a good place. Yeah.
Well, and the Grand Hotel is certainly a special occasion type place, but I believe they have afternoon tea that you can, even if you're not staying at the hotel, you can partake in, of course, for a fee. But we were also able to just sit on the front porch and have a cocktail. And the view from that front porch is absolutely stunning. And of course, the horses are going by just kind of on the level below you, bringing luggage. And it's just different than anything else you're going to experience. So we thoroughly enjoyed that. We loved visiting the forts, I guess I should say. The views all over the island are just completely spectacular. So take the time to just walk around. I mean, we walked, stumbled upon some unexpected things that we didn't set out to get to, but we were just walking around and discovered them. So it was really a fun experience. How much time would you say, how many days should loopers allot if they really want to do Mackinac right?
I would say 3 days, really. There's so much to do. I mean, the fort itself that you mentioned, and I failed to mention, is spectacular.
Oh, the cannon that goes off right
Mhm.
above the marina, if you're
Mhm.
not aware, it can scare
Yeah,
you.
yeah. About 5 o'clock, they send it off, so it's going to make you juggle your cocktails if you're not. Um, but it's a really cool place and just gives you a sense of what the history is. I think the fort, the having a dinner, you can actually have or make a reservation for dinner at the Grand Hotel,
Mhm.
and that's also pretty spectacular. Just going around the island, it takes, half a day. Going into the interior of the island, that takes another half a day. So, I mean, and then just enjoying the ambience of the dock and meeting other people. You'll meet loopers, but you'll also meet a lot of local boaters from all over the Great Lakes area that come in there. And they'll get some other yacht clubs that come in and sometimes they party a little hard at night. One thing that I have heard some people make complaints about in terms of being at Mackinac Island is that the harbor itself can be a little rough.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't really think it's that bad myself. You'll get some ferry wakes for some ferries running late, but they usually stop at the end of the breakwater, so you don't get the big wakes coming in. And it's really well protected from the southeast because Round Island blocks it. But if the wind is up, you're going to get a little chop
Mhm.
in the harbor there.
Yeah. So one of the other big kind of landmarks or icons in this area is, of course, Big Mac, which is the
Mhm.
bridge. Tell us about the bridge, and loopers, of course, go right under it. But what is it about the bridge that seems to attract a lot of attention?
Well, it's one of those things that I think the state of Michigan is really proud about. It was built in 1957. It was the longest suspension bridge in the world at the time, and it's still in terms of the span between the anchorages, not the towers themselves, but the anchorages where the cables tie in. It's still the longest span in the Western Hemisphere. It's only 4 lanes. It goes up to 150 feet, and it can be quite a nerve-wracking drive for folks who go across it. In fact, they do have a stock of drivers that will drive your car or your truck across the bridge if you're not ready to do it yourself. It's just a beautiful bridge with the colors. The towers are white and the bridge itself is green, and it's painted every year, all the time. There's just like any bridge like that. It's just a beautiful bridge, and it's just a really cool thing to go under.
Yeah. And is it correct that it's really the dividing line between Lake Michigan and Lake Huron? Is that kind of the point that most people consider the break between the two lakes?
Pretty
Yeah.
much. It's just it's the closest. It spans the closest parts between the two peninsulas, and so yeah, you could consider that. Once you're under the bridge, you're now in Lake Michigan.
Yeah. So, as we look to wrap up, what have I not asked about that you want your fellow loopers to know about Mackinac City and this area in general?
I think I can let Libby answer that as well, but the I mentioned boat camping as a kid in the Lachino Islands. That's just to the north, and that's like a little mini Thousand Islands area. That's, I think, a beautiful area to stop over. If you're traveling at 7.5 knots like we do, it's only about 2 hours to the north before you're into the islands there. Um, there's also, if you can get in a car, I would highly recommend going up to Quamanon Falls, or maybe even the Great Lakes Shipwreck Museum, which is up in Whitefish Bay, not too far from where the Edmund Fitzgerald sank back in I think it was 75 that ship sank. And then the last thing I would say is, what a lot of people like to come into the U.S. Into Drummond Island and
Mm-hmm.
then go in. I would take the time, if you have the time, to go up the St. Mary's River to Sault Ste. Marie. The Kemp Marina there is right close to downtown Sault Ste. Marie, where they've got some really cool restaurants and shops, and it's right next to a freighter, an old freighter called the Valley Camp, which was built in, I think, the 1920s, which they basically parked there and turned into a big museum. And the museum is fascinating. It has a couple of the lifeboats from the Edmund Fitzgerald that they were able to recover, and just talks about general history of the area. And actually, there's so much history up there. There's so many museums in the whole area. It's really kind of cool just to go in and experience all of that.
Anything to add, Libby?
No, I think Tad's right, is that there are some jumping off points from Mackinac Island, and definitely going into the Alachua Islands, Hessel, Cedarville, that area, it's fun, and there's good anchorage in there. So if you can't get into Mackinac Island and you get there too soon, this is a great spot to go anchor and then come in. And also we did anchor behind, was it Round Island?
Yeah, we did for the day.
For the day, and
Mhm.
and it was like swimming in a swimming pool. The water was so clear and that aqua color.
Mhm.
It was fun. So that's another place to kind of hold up. I don't know if you can anchor there all night.
I don't know if I'd anchor there all night unless the weather's going to be good for the next couple of days.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
yes, it's definitely one of those anchorages. So yeah.
Yeah. This has been yeah, this has been great information. I know loopers are headed that way. So I want to thank you for sharing the details of this area. So many people are going to enjoy it this year. I'm excited for them, but a little envious too. I'd love to be up there right
Amen.
about now.
Yep.
So Tad and Libbie Sheldon, thanks again for joining us and for sharing your experiences.
Thank you. Appreciate the
Kim.
opportunity, Kim.
You're very welcome. And thanks to everyone who's watched or listened to this week. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Great Loop Radio podcast. Until then, safe cruising.